Welcome everyone to session six of Mad Keen for Lean, our 2025 Lean in Higher Education International Conference. We are kicking off this session with Kim Marie and Bikram, their presentation, the Goldilocks Protocol, Finding Just Right in an Unpredictable World. I will just do a brief introduction for both of you and then I'll hand over to you. So Dr. Kim Marie Jenkins is an organisational culture, leadership and change strategist with over 25 years of experience in higher education in both the US and England. So Kim Marie serves as the Senior Director for Organisational Design and Leadership Development in the University of Maine system, where she partners with UMS's senior leadership to drive strategic initiatives. Her signature strength includes building relationships and trust with leaders and teams to better understand their needs, design better outcomes, and overcome barriers in achieving them. Kim is responsible for executive employment, from search to onboarding and leadership coaching, and is involved in a variety of system-wide committees and initiatives. She teaches courses in change management, organisational development, culture, and ethical leadership. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you.
Dr. Bikram Ghosh holds dual roles at the University of Tasmania as part of a central continuous improvement team and as a practicing academic. We've got a few people playing in both spaces here, don't we? It's an interesting development. The dual engagement enables him to explore and translate between practice, research, governance, and teaching across multiple domains. In his CI role, Bikram works with teams to navigate complex challenges, pursuing whole of problem solutions that prioritise impact, sustainability, and resilience. A self-confessed nerd of all kinds, as I think our steerco would attest to, Bikram draws from these varied experiences to inform his CI practice, his teaching, and his multidisciplinary research. He's an active member of the Lean in Higher Education Network and currently serves as Secretary of the Lean HE Asia Pacific chapter. Welcome to both of you. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Bikram, shall I just dive in?
That sounds great, Kim. Yes, please.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. So, really a delight to be here with you all. And Bikram and I are quite used to meeting at this time of the evening. We're working on another project together. And so it's quite often that we spend this time together anyway, or morning, evening or morning, as you have it. So I wanted to start off by saying the obvious, which is that the world is unpredictable. And I'm a very visual person, but I am not, unfortunately, an artist. And so when I asked ChatGPT to illustrate what an unpredictable world might look like, this is not exactly what's in my head, but it's not far off, although I'm not sure about the bouncing beach ball. But it is indeed unpredictable. We've talked quite a bit about that over the past couple of days, and not a surprise to anyone. And in fact, one of the reasons why I enjoy working so much with our colleagues around the world is because there's some amount of comfort in knowing that we're all experiencing and practicing life amid uncertainty. I get to learn that it's not just me. And we all have a chance to learn from each other about how to deal with ambiguity. And that's true, right? We don't know what each day will bring because the world is unpredictable. Sometimes life can feel overwhelming because there is so much uncertainty, and we desperately try to make sense and create order. One of the many things that my friend Bikram has encouraged me to consider is how much of our world is unpredictable. So imagine that you are preparing for a public presentation to the Board of Trustees or Board of Regents at your university. Big meeting, large public, a big deal, right? You feel confident about what you're presenting, your knowledge, your content, and you can anticipate the questions, or at least you think you can. You can anticipate most of the questions, perhaps maybe 80% of them. And your mind begins to worry about the 20%, the unpredictable wildcard questions. You spend time researching for every eventuality. You begin over preparing for questions that might never come because you're afraid of the consequence of not knowing the answer. The anticipation of the wild card questions takes up most of our energy, our time, and our worries in life. But are the unpredictable questions really unpredictable? In these situations, we know the audience, we know the content, we know the stakes. Can we prepare the just right amount? In other words, can we prepare for the majority of unknown eventualities? And then ask ourselves, what's the worst that could happen if I miss something? What are the consequences? What is the consequence of saying, I don't know, to a question that you didn't predict or didn't prepare for? Is it really that there is a consequence, or is there something else that I can change? Have you built trust with the group? Have you set expectations that you will sometimes not have the answer on the spot? Can we prepare for the majority of unknown eventualities? So I want to tease out that question a little bit. When we treat everything, every possibility as having equal probability, we over-prepare. And when we over-prepare, we undermine both effectiveness and agility. So right now, it didn't take long before I inserted one of my children into a presentation because they often make an appearance. But right now, um, one of my daughters is exploring Europe, and you can see her route here. She's in Malta today. And like many travelers before her, she is carrying all of her essentials in a backpack. If she carried a large suitcase, she might be prepared for more eventualities, but she would sacrifice agility and costs that would come with trying to move around with a large suitcase on cobblestone streets and airplanes. So when she packed, she had to imagine what she would need for the majority of unknown eventualities. In 8 weeks, she was likely to encounter rain. She was likely to want to swim and to need some clothes that she could layer in multiple climates. So she decided that she would prepare for most eventualities and then plan to procure anything she hadn't anticipated needing. Do we over-prepare when the world is uncertain? I want to share with you my pocketbook theory. Lots of us carry a pocketbook or a bag with us most days, and I certainly do, and it looks actually very much like this one. It has every credit card, insurance cards, hairbrush, lip balms in multiple glosses and colors, car keys, office keys, Band-Aids or plasters. And I grab it every day without thought because I never know what I or one of my kids might need. But occasionally I go to a show or to a dinner and I don't want to bring my big pocketbook. I prefer to bring something that looks a lot like this because it's more stylish. It's super cute. It might match my outfit. It's also smaller, and I have to become much more intentional about what I put in it. Usually my phone and one credit card, possibly keys if I happen to be driving. So my pocketbook theory is this, and you could say briefcase, whatever you want, but I theorize that most of us use the space available just because we can. We fill up our bags just in case. We take on the amount of work that we can fit into 8 hours or into 5 days, even if it could be accomplished in less time. The question that Bikram and I are curious about is whether we are over-prepared for under eventualities, assuming that all eventualities are equally probable. Like the Pareto principle suggests, do we spend 80% of our time, energy, and resources worrying about the 20%, the under eventualities? The predictable portion of what we do is made up of standard and expected things. Building practice around what we can predict frees us up to respond reflexively. So just like the pocketbook, you can either fill it up intentionally or unintentionally, or with radical clarity. If you go hiking, what do you really need? Probably some water and a granola bar, but do you need a credit card? It may not do you much good in the woods. So if we focus on the purpose that we are seeking, we can focus on what is essential, what we must have, what things might help us to achieve it better. What are the consequences of not having these things? And much like with the Board of Trustee meeting, is it a huge, massive consequence if I don't know an answer, or will it be okay? Deciding what is extraneous to the purpose is really important. And thinking about how much of the unpredictable is critical to what we need. So if we were Goldilocks, what would not too much or not too little, but just right look like? So I'm going to turn it over to Bikram now. And as I do, I'd like you to please think about, what does your agility pocketbook look like? In other words, what skills and strengths do you regularly use that allow you to adapt to any situation? And we're going to come back to that question at the end. Bikram.
Thanks, Kim. Before I jump into this conversation, I just wanted to add a little aside, if you will. It's been really wonderful working with Kim on all of this because she seems to pass through all the stuff that I waffle about and help me make sense of it, if nothing else. And one of the things that I'm trying to make sense of is something I'm working on in my research area right now is helping people make decisions and realizing just how much impact cognitive load has, which fed really heavily into what we're discussing today. So I'd like to leave you with that bit of context as we talk about this. Now, Kim just talked to us about intentionality based on your situation, right? Granola bars in the woods and not so much a credit card. So when we talk about agility or responsiveness, we often assume that it's being ready for anything. But agility doesn't come from preparing for every scenario. It comes from that situational awareness that Kim was talking to us about. Think of a sailor on shifting seas. They don't predict every wave. They read the water, adjust the sails or the direction of the vessel, and they stay attuned to subtle changes. That awareness, not an encyclopedia of possible storms, is what keeps them moving. Organizations are the same. When we over-prepare for under-eventualities, we burden ourselves with excess plans and resources, making it really hard to make decisions about critical things. That cognitive load that I was talking about earlier. Situational awareness asks us a different question. What's actually happening right now? And what matters most? Now, if we take a step out and maybe sideways, in manufacturing and in lean law, which is maybe familiar for all of us, Toyota's Jidoka principle about systems that are designed to stop themselves when a problem arises demonstrates how awareness creates systemic agility and responsiveness instead of extra inventory. The same applies to people, right? Awareness is preparation. Not having a million choices to have to choose from when the last thing you need to do is, juggle extra mental burden. And systemic awareness enhances that responsiveness by fine-tuning what we need to focus on. Kim, can we jump to the next slide, please? Cool, thanks. So I ask you then, instead of preparing for every possible scenario, what if we got radically clear about what we actually need? The Goldilocks protocol that we decided on as a name for our presentation asks us, what is just right or just enough to stay adaptive without waste? That situational awareness I just talked about is critical here. Otherwise, we're choosing increased uncertainty and making things harder, rather than simplifying our choices and focusing on impact. So this is, for those of you who are familiar with minimalism, this is probably not unfamiliar territory for you. So minimalism isn't less work, right? For those of us who've engaged in that sort of practice, we know it's precision, removing noise, so actions and decisions actually fit context and enable us to prepare effectively, rather than exhaustively. It's the discipline of sensing, pausing, and responding with clarity, whether we're decluttering desks or refining purpose and process. When people know their purpose and the boundaries of what's just enough, that's when awareness replaces anxiety and adaptability becomes natural. In other words, agility isn't the outcome of more preparation. It's the product of better preparation. We could jump to the next slide, Kim. Thanks. So instead of preparing for every possible scenario, let's have a look at how we use what we have. Because often we confuse being ready for anything with being ready for what matters. This is where clarity of purpose is key. We're all familiar with what-if planning. In fact, I think there are formal exercises built around that term, right? But I put to you that what-if planning is actually pushing us in the opposite direction from where we should be heading? What if planning scatters our effort across multiple possibilities? Instead, I'm inviting you to think of replacing what if planning with what how thinking to build adaptive capability and innovation. So here you've got a little picture from, I think somewhere in a village in India, where, a whole bunch of make-do parts has been pulled together to achieve a really important purpose, which in this case is irrigation. So it's not easy. This sort of innovation and adaptive capability is critically dependent on understanding and not just simply being aware of what you have in your bag or at your disposal, and on practice in working from first principles. So earlier today in a presentation, Bill, who's online, posed a great question about how we value AI versus human talent and automating what we consider low value activities. And a question there that arose for me is, what's the implicit value we're gaining from explicit activities, and how is that training us or building our capability to be adaptable? I mean, when I'm teaching, that's one of the things I really stress with my students, and it makes them a little uncomfortable in the beginning of semester. It seems like they settle into it because they seem to have fun towards the end once they've become a little bit more comfortable with the idea of building from first principles rather than relying on content. So my job to them explicitly is not teaching them stuff, but instead how to make sense of stuff and choose the things that matter for where they're going to be applying that knowledge. In a rapidly changing world that we currently inhabit, this ability to be critical and responsive, this agility, I think is the secret sauce that underpins resilience and sustainability of what we're trying to do, the sustainability of our purpose and our mission. But this agility collapses when people don't know how to adapt, because they've only rehearsed what-if scenarios and focused on product over and above process. So in a higher education context, one of the things I hear a lot, so the type of teaching I do is, in a very applied context. So I hear back from a lot of my students, but I also hear back from potential employers in industries around us. And one of the things I've heard over and over again is how when they recruit university graduates, these graduates only have book smarts. And so we've got to teach them the business again. What I hear from what they're saying there is that we've equipped our students with a lot of stuff, but maybe not that intrinsic and, I'd argue, key capability to choose from that stuff to apply what's really meaningful in that context. So if we slip to the next slide, Kim. What I'd like you to think about is how we then translate this into practice. Now, you may have picked up from the number of times I've mentioned resilience that this is big on my mind right now, only because I think, helping both individuals and organizations be resilient is the surest means to helping achieve purpose and mission and impact at both those scales, right? So how do we translate this idea, this just right thinking, into practice? In the context of resilience, there are several elements that interact together to achieve, successful, sustainable outcomes, right? Self, strategy, structure, social networks, supply chains. Each of these it clarifies a what is enough question for us. What do I carry? Or what can I access on demand? For those of you who were around yesterday, I spent a bit of time talking about redundancy and modularity in another session, but it applies here as well. If we can design systems so that functions can be temporarily dropped under pressure and brought back online when operating conditions improve, that's a perfect example of what Kim and I are wanting to explore with you today, right? What do we actually need right now? What's critical for us to keep going, and what's value add? What can we drop for a little while, or perhaps get rid of altogether and replace with something better. For those of us, for all of us in this community, that sort of thinking is probably not unfamiliar at all, but it doesn't often translate into practice. Another aspect of that interacting set of factors for resilience that is often forgotten is that we are better together. Right? Social networks, one of those key functions, is help us be better. Well, they can actually be better for resilience than having stockpiles, because connection replaces over preparation. What that allows us to do then is also integrate what we can access from our networks and support structures in addition to what we carry with us. So we can make this choice about what to carry, what to leave behind, and what we can borrow when we actually need to, much like Kim's daughter as she's traveling. On that next slide, Kim, is perhaps a little bit of a refocus on how we can make decisions, especially if we have positions of influence in organizations. So if we're organizational decision makers, for instance. Critically, we need to start by defining purpose for us and for those who are relying on our decisions. That means we can then identify critical functions versus value add, helping map a value stream for critical and non-critical functions, then translates to determining the thresholds for when to suspend what and when to reactivate those things again, right? So helps us then determine with this just right lens, what we start, what we stop, what we pause, and thinking back to those social networks or support structures, what we can partner on as a means to that continued sustainable impact. For those of us who love Peter Drucker quotes, and you'll know I love them if you talk to me much, is one that sticks with me is efficiency is doing things right while effectiveness is doing the right things. And all of what we're talking about, Kim and I today, is about picking the right things to do. But we can only determine the right things when we are clear on purpose. Now, Kim was talking about, uncertainty a little while ago and how we respond to it. Often, I suspect we all have found that we respond to uncertainty by trying to control what we can. And tending to prepare for all those possibilities that we can't control, those under eventualities that Kim, you were talking about. Unfortunately, often this leads to what's typically referred to as resource efficiency. Essentially, how much can I get out of what I have for me, versus what I think Nicholas Mordig referred to as flow efficiency, right? How much I can contribute or support our collaborative outcomes. Over control as a response to this sort of uncertainty multiplies waste. You heard that from Rufus, for those of you who watched his keynote. In contrast, clarity distributes capability. In Lean, we talk about respect, which underpins this ability to distribute capability. But that respect also goes hand in hand with trust for the people we work with and their ability to do things. Clarity of purpose seems to sit around all of this and helps us decide what enough might be. And when we can determine that, that's how awareness replaces anxiety and adaptability becomes natural. In other words, agility isn't the outcome of more preparation, it's the product of better perception. So I'm going to hand back to Kim with a reminder to all of us in summary that focusing on people is probably the big secret here. People innovate, not companies, like Seth Godin told us. And it's hard to innovate or adapt, or indeed to be effective when you're weighed down by unnecessary baggage. Kim?
Great. Thank you, Bikram. One of the things I did not over-prepare for was the likelihood that my mouse would go out of control there for a minute, so I do apologize. We thought about several different questions that we wanted to ask of this group because inquiring minds want to know, and it feels like a rather philosophical, existential twist that we've put on your day. So there were many things that we could ask you, but one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, is really thinking about what does your agility pocketbook look like? So, what are the things that you carry as a strength and a skill through your day that you don't necessarily have to pack in a briefcase or, cart down the hall, in a big tote, that you keep with you, that you can pull out in any situation, and adapt to any situation. And so we wanted to kick off any questions that you might have with that as a prompt. And if folks need to ruminate about that for a minute, absolutely fine. If there are other questions you'd like to ask, we're happy to engage in conversation with you for our remaining time. So curious about any thoughts that folks have about this. I think perhaps I'll stop sharing so I can see my screen a little bit better.
This Bill. So Bill asked whether this approach ties into FMEA in any way. What are your thoughts, Kim?
So tell me a little bit more about FMEA. I'm not sure I've heard it in that context, Bill. I apologize.
Yeah.
You want me to talk, or is Bikram talking? Sorry.
I want to better understand. Is it I assume from what you're writing there that it's about clarity, about focus and clarity?
Yeah, so FMEA as a tool, as one of our Lean Six Sigma tools, helps us say, okay, what could possibly go wrong, and prioritizes what could go wrong, and prioritizes the impact of those things that go wrong, whether they're a high probability or a low probability, to give us a sense of what we can and should focus on, knowing that we probably can't focus on everything. So it just seemed, as you were talking, it seems like it seemed to me to be a tie-in. So I just thought I'd ask the question.
The way you've described it, I would say 100%. As Bikram knows, my 6-word motto is "What's the worst that could happen?" And it really helps me think about life and how what I need to worry about and what I don't. And so and that's sort of a mental exercise that you go through in your head in terms of the situation. And in higher education, when we're doing process improvement, there are very few, really, luckily, very few highly tragic probabilities. And so planning for the possibilities rather than, what might be outliers is, depending on the level of danger that we're talking about or the level of risk. Obviously in, medical schools, healthcare schools and such, it's a different story. But often I think about that when I try, particularly if I'm working with a team and trying to help them to let go of some of the things that they've been holding on to that are almost paralyzing because they're so worried about the what ifs rather than focusing on the what hows. Yeah, Bikram, what do you think?
I apologize, Kim, for putting you on the spot. When I read about FMEA, my head went to your 6-word motto, but I had that conversation in my head. So apologies.
That's good.
Yeah, I'll jump onto the yes, absolutely bandwagon too, Bill. And thanks for bringing up FMEA. I think the effects analysis for me is the most beneficial part of FMEA because we can always find a whole bunch of failure modes. But that to me narrows down the number of choices we have to make so that we can make better choices rather than more choices. If you'll indulge a little bit of esoteria, Kate said yesterday to a bunch of people who came along that I spend some of my time doing, well, I can't remember how you described it, Kate, like combat sports or something, but
yeah, part-time combat sport. I think that was it.
Yeah. So over sort of almost 4 decades of doing that, I've had the opportunity to teach into, like law enforcement and emergency response groups and things like that. And every time I run a workshop, they're really disappointed because I open by saying, we're going to do one thing and one thing only today, versus, them sort of rocking up and expecting that over 3 hours, they're going to learn a plethora of different really fancy things. And it speaks to this idea is, in a situation, what are the things that can go wrong? Prioritize what those impacts might be, and then find the simplest way to respond to them, so that just right approach to respond to them. The fewer things we need to make critical decisions about, the better those decisions and responses can be, I've found, especially when we're under pressure. For what it's worth, I've found this principle play out over and over again in all sorts of different contexts, and links very closely to how we would approach problem analysis with FMEA.
Great question. Thank you, Bill. And thank you for sharing that resource, Melissa. That's why I love this group. Are there other observations or questions, or perhaps things that are in your agility pocketbook toolkit that sort of save you on a regular basis, or things that maybe are extraneous, maybe things that your team takes on and does with regularity that you probably don't use that much, things that you invest time in that don't really, get used as much as you'd like? Okay.
Just earlier in the chat, Candace had just noted Lean Toolkit and Facilitation Toolkit.
Oh, yes.
Very good.
That's a nice portable resource and one that you can hand across.
Yep, absolutely. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Chris, you're talking about practicing curiosity. It's cool that you talk about being comfortable in ambiguity. I suspect many of us find that quite challenging. So that's really cool to hear about, and something to try and emulate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess as someone who over prepares at times, it's because of the risk of something going wrong, right? Or the perceived risk. And so, you have to be able to make decisions on imperfect information. You have to make decisions in particular timeframes, but it's actually quite scary to do that. So embracing, I like your statements about clarity, distributing capability, and agility. I just think it's also quite scary to have a go at doing it.
Why do you think that is, Chris? What factors do you think contribute to making it scary for us, if it seems to make sense?
I would say the risk of something going wrong and then looking foolish as a result. Although, I mean, it's what people do every day, right? As in the job I'm in, well, I've been in for a while over the years, I often say that I have to approve in trust. I get so many things that come to me that I have to say yes to because of the delegations or whatever. I don't know the details of most of them, but I have to have a team around me that I trust, and I can just click and say yes, yes, yes. So I guess I'm not carrying around all the expertise in my pocketbook, and I love that that metaphor. I'm probably carrying around trust in my pocketbook, and it makes it a much smaller and more portable one.
Oh, I love that.
That's lovely.
Yeah. It's fantastic, and it also speaks to empowering your teams and as a leader too, and giving them the freedom that they need to rely on their expertise and do their jobs. So that's really fantastic. Yeah.
And I think Bikram, Rufus talked about that a lot yesterday in his keynote as well. Just bringing back trust within our teams and our staff and our students to get them to know that they're going to do the right thing. And then there's ways that you can follow that up if it's not happening. So that really resonated with me yesterday.
Same. I really appreciated his perspective as a leader who can trust in that way and who sets the tone for the organization in that way, and have often thought about our own system of universities where we regularly, send men and women around driving these, $60,000, $80,000 vehicles to do construction or whatever they're doing. But when it comes time to buy a small part to fix something, they have to go through 5 or 6 layers of approval to buy this, $10 part. And it really, flips things on its head when you start thinking about, well, what, why is that? Is it about a lack of trust, or is there something else going on? And it was so freeing hearing him talk in that way. His keynote was really fantastic. And certainly a presentation that I think many, many leaders should see if they get a chance. So yeah, appreciate that. Well, good. I'm assuming that by the lack of questions, Bikram, we've probably achieved radical clarity in our presentation, and but certainly happy to engage in conversation further with folks around this.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kim and Bikram. I think that's made us think from the detail micro through to what is actually in my bag. I'm looking at my bag over there just going, that's mildly embarrassing today, the amount of stuff I've put into my bag just in case I might need it. Right through to this will make you laugh. This is going to make an appearance a bit later. This was the very beautiful wooden artifact that I was given at the University of Cambridge conference in the conference closure end of last year. And I thought this morning as I was leaving the house, I need to take this with me just in case I need it for something today. And what that will be is playing in my mind at the moment. But yeah, I won't explain everything else that's sitting in my bag, but but how applicable is that concept of what do we start, what do we stop, what do we pause? And then I love that you've introduced that concept of what do we partner to do. Rufus yesterday talked a little bit around how we tend to bring a lot of consultants to do things to us, maybe not with us. I'm probably a little bit more flexible in that space, where it's like I'm happy to partner if there's a specific expertise that we may not have, that is sort of time boxed. Bring it in, learn, partner, and then continue. So that's a really interesting piece to put in that sort of stop, start, continue sort of toolkit that we all probably use as well. I was just also reflecting on what are the skills and things that I have in my little agility pocketbook as I work through my everyday. And I think one of the big things is, there's probably 2 things. Communication skills. I just think, even though we don't explicitly say as a continuous improvement practitioner or a lean practitioner, you need phenomenal communication skills. You need to know how to tell stories, but how to tell stories that resonate with the audience that you have at the time. So you can't just have that one message. It's got to be flexible and change so that to respond to what's in it for the person that you're talking to. And I think that other one is trying to maintain that veneer of calm. It's like, and I love your, what's the worst thing that could happen? How often do I say that every day? What's the worst thing that could happen? So luckily we don't have a hospital, so I'm okay to say that. But it's a good way to ground you, I think. So you need that calmness, that ability to ground the people who are around you. So I thank you both for a really thought-provoking discussion this morning. Appreciate both of you taking the time to have that with us this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Big round of applause. Big round of applause. I think Bill's been putting some comments into the chat. Just Bill's noted a couple of different tools that really support the thinking that Kim and Bikram have been talking around, in addition to the FMEA, the Pareto, the Eisenhower matrix are also really interesting. What he carries around is a problem-solving Carter to show others how it can be used. That's great. I thought you would carry around copies of your book, Bill. Just read this and
I'm not that But it's amazing how many people feel like they're facing a fire. They don't have a clue as to where to start. So if you can help them, start with a PDCA approach or DMAIC or pick what, whatever you like, it somehow brings some I don't know, it helps to bring everybody's level of panic down if you at least look like, what does it say, never let them see you sweat. If you at least look like you don't have the answer, but you have a way to get to the answer.
I think that's great. Not feeling you need the solution, just feeling that you can help them take a step towards understanding what a solution might be. That's such great language, Bill. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Oh, so good. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.